We acknowledge the lands of the traditional custodians across Australia. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples' continuing connection to land, water and sky country. We acknowledge the wine regions and hundreds of different nations around this continent, and the ancient soils on which we stand and grow. From the Wadani saltwater peoples of the Margaret River in our west, to the East Coast Sunrise people of the Yuin Nation, and the Southern Island and Saltbush peoples of the Nione peoples of Tasmania. Today and always, we pay our deep respects to the custodians, those who went before and those who will follow, as the knowledge holders of tomorrow. This is Australia.
Good evening, everybody. We'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri peoples, the traditional owners of the land that we meet on. We'd like to honour their elders past and present, and we'd like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people. So welcome. A bit of housekeeping first off. I'm sure many of you have used this webinar software before, but on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll find the chat, so you can chat away to your heart's content there. On the next pane, you'll find Q&A. So if you have any questions that you'd like to address to the winemakers, please feel free to field your questions there. And if you could put maybe in brackets which winemaker you'd like to pose the question to, that'd be fantastic and very helpful for us. We'll try to get to all the questions, but some of you may miss out, but rest assured, the fine people at Wine Australia will follow up and they'll answer your questions personally. And in the third pane, you'll find additional material. So there's a tasting booklet in there and a PDF. I know some of you have probably got the PDF in front of you, but you can download it there and follow along with the wines. There's some brief technical notes on the wines we're looking at tonight. And you can go from there. So welcome, everybody. On behalf of New South Wales Wine, the New South Wales Government, Winemakers of the Riverina and Wine Australia, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's little virtual tasting. Of course, we'll be looking at some fantastic wines from the Riverina and talking about 3 winemakers with us tonight. So please feel free to charge them with lots of questions. There's a very oft-used term of engine room to describe a wine region that's very important to a country, but I think the Riverina can very much take the mantle of being the heartland of Australian wine when it comes to that respect. It's probably a term that sort of shines with use, but I think it's very appropriate in this case. It's got just over 20,000 hectares of vine, under vine, and it's the second largest region in Australia and the largest in New South Wales. So it's very important, crushing just over 354,000 tonnes of fruit last year. So it's a immensely important region for Australian wine. The soil types here, probably looking at the ubiquitous red-brown earth, sandy loams, pockets of limestone and clays, annual rainfalls around 230 millimetres of rain a year, and it is a warm Mediterranean climate. I think a lot of people's wine journey starts with Riverina wine. 12.5 million cases exported. I think it touches a lot of consumers, and for many, it is the first experience with Australian wine. Many of them stay in the Riverina wines. They just enjoy the flavour and the characteristics and the experience they get from those wines. Many move on through the price tiers. But it's an immensely important Australian region, and I think that you will enjoy the wines that we're going to look at tonight. There's main grapes grown in the Riverina. We're looking at Chardonnay and Semillon, Shiraz and Cab Sav, but there's over 60 varieties that are grown in the region, and we'll be looking at a few of those tonight. So it's revisiting Riverina, the hidden gems. So joining us tonight, we will have Emma Norbiato from Calabria, Julie Mortlock from De Bortz, and James Ciccato from Berton. Man, the pronunciation always gets me. And we'll be looking at a Montepulciano from Calabria, and a trio of Durifs, which is somewhat of a regional hero variety, and then of course 2 Botrytis Semillons, for which the region is very famous. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Emma up, and we'll have a look at the Montepulciano. Hi, Emma.
Thank you, Dave. I've got a glass here.
Shall we do it?
Yes. I must say I love the intro and what you said about the engine room of the Riverina, because I firmly believe that the better we can do our job, the more people will love Australian wine. So thank you for that.
Oh, no, absolute pleasure. So I'm a big fan of your private bin wines.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about the Italian varietals and the story behind them in the region.
Riverina. Yeah, so as you said, it's a very warm climate here. And these varieties are traditionally late ripening. So what that means is when they're ripening, or when they're still very small, hard green berries, is when the peak of summer is. So they're not being affected by the heat. So that means they hold their acid, they ripen late. So this will be the last red variety that we pick. But it is, as you can see, it maintains beautiful colour and beautiful acid that really suits this climate.
Yeah, I remember speaking to a winemaker several years ago, and we often call them alternative varieties here in Australia. But she mentioned she calls them appropriate varieties because they're suited to our climate. Now, it's pretty much all the varieties ending in O. They seem to hold their natural acidity and very suited to the climate. Your private bin wines in particular, which I love, and I think they represent amazing value. What other varieties do you have outside of Monte?
So we've got a Nero Diavola and a Pinot Bianco. In the past, we've also had a Vermentino and an Aglianico when the year is good enough.
Okay.
But what I must say, when we grow this variety in this region, I think what sets us apart is that we actually intervene a lot in the viticulture. Montepulciano loves to throw a massive crop, so there'll be green bunches everywhere and bunch on bunch, but we go through and we drop fruit, we hand prune. We really manipulate the viticulture so the architecture's right, which gives us great light inception in this variety. So that doesn't happen in a lot of blocks because of scale in this region, but it really sets this particular block apart for us. So yields are down and quality is up.
Do you find that intensive sort of canopy management is a common theme amongst the Italian varietals in the region? Are they quite boisterous?
Yeah, they are. They all like to throw a big crop. So when you want to make something great out of them, you have to intervene, in my opinion, with viticulture.
Okay.
So you don't just, machine prune and then walk away and hope for the best.
Sure. And how much Montepulciano do you have in your vineyard?
We only have one block. It's owned by the Calabria family, and it's only about 5 acres or 2.5 hectares. So it's very, very small.
So it's tiny.
So we've got this, as you said, engine room, very big winery operating large volumes of Shiraz and Chardonnay, as you alluded to. And then in comes a very small parcel of Montepulciano, and we have to stop and slow down and keep it separate. And we've got all these big things happening everywhere else.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So it's kind of a pet project. You you look after it as your baby.
We have, everyone loves it. So we all have to stop and make sure we do it properly, because it's very easy to let it get mixed up with all the big things that are happening.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And the future for appropriate varieties in the region, do you think they've got a bright future?
I do. I think they're fantastic, but we just need more exposure, more people to want to drink them and buy them and believe in them, and believe that the Riverina can make great wines I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, absolutely. The colour is fantastic, and it's so bright and forward.
Yep.
And it's just really quite a punchy and really got great detail.
I think it's I find it this wine difficult to describe. Like, it's got a dark, inky core.
Sure.
But the palate's almost medium bodied and silky, so it makes it go really well with food. So it's great with pizza and sort of not too heavy foods, because it doesn't have that big structure.
Is that sort of a common sort of theme in the private bin range? Are they sort of built around that sort of?
They're very food friendly wines, So we're aiming to have them respect the variety, but to be food friendly. And, you know, we're about food and wine.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
an Italian company, and so food and wine's a big part of the culture. So
it's a wonderful thing, isn't it, when it's like a wine becomes an extra sort of implement on the table. It's sort of like it meshes in with the food so well. But this is absolutely fantastic.
Yes, we're really happy with it.
And so you want to talk briefly about the Nero as well, because the Nero is one of my favourites of the private bin wines.
Yep.
How much of that do you have?
It's exactly the same size as
really?
the Montepulciano, so the blocks are right next to each other.
Yep.
And again, it throws a really big crop that we have to manipulate. And the Nero, so for newcomers in Australia, when they're coming and they don't know these wines very well, I say, if you like Merlot, try Nero, and if you like Shiraz, try Monty. If they want to try something different and they don't know what way to head, that's the way that I lead them. The Nero has really beautiful fruit. The 22 is, I think, going to be one of the best ones that we've made.
Yeah,
the yields were really low this year. But yeah, the Nero's more medium bodied and quite violet in its fruit profile.
Of course, being fine Australians, we sort of shorten everything. So Montepulciano's Monty and
yes, Nero is Nero di Avola. Sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's a peculiar Australian thing we tend to do.
Yeah. But the other thing I think people get confused about is often I'll show people wine and it'll be say Montepulciano on the front as it does, and they'll say, "Oh, I've been there." I say, "Oh, you may have, but this grape variety is not from that region in Tuscany. It is from the Abruzzo region." So
exactly.
We have to keep clarifying that as well.
And there's a fine tradition of Italian immigrants in the Riverina as well, isn't there? Is that sort of are they very pleased you're growing these varieties?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of Italian immigrants here, including the Calabria family, my family. So it's very, I suppose, patriarchal. Everyone's proud of their heritage and they're proud to be growing Italian varieties that I suppose fit the cuisine that they like to eat as well. So,
yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Emma.
You're welcome.
And lovely wine. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Julie, let's talk Durif.
We can.
We can talk Durif. Tell us about this wine. What are we drinking here?
We're drinking the Deen de Bortoli 2019 Durif. And I think it's quite the point that it's Deen de Bortoli label, because Deen was the first person to bring Durif into the Riverina in the mid-1980s.
Okay.
And it's planted on our property out to the west of Griffith.
Okay, so it's a bit of a hero variety for the region, isn't it? It's sort
it
of
has become that, yes.
Yeah, and how much Durif do you have planted?
Well, it's expanded greatly in the last couple of years.
Okay.
The vineyard out in Erican, where the Durif is planted, we pulled out most of the other varieties and we've planted all mainly to Durif because it does so well out there. The soil's a little sandier out there, and it just ripens beautifully.
Yeah, brilliant. And I noticed some people are calling it Petite Syrah.
Yes.
Just the differentiation, I guess.
Well, in the export market, they understand the variety as Petite Syrah rather than Durif as we do in Australia.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's part of the problem with trying to sell these wines, as well as the other Italians, is the general public in Australia don't know what they are. You know, for one, they can't pronounce them, so that becomes very difficult. So they tend to go and then pick up the Shiraz because that's what they know.
Yeah, gotcha.
So we need to educate them, you know, as Emma was saying about, you know, all these other varieties that we do very well here. And
the take up for Durif is people love it?
They do enjoy it when you get them to taste it.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah,
if you just notice that that slight look, it's raining here, and we're getting the odd drip through a tin roof, but it sounds really nice, like the rain on the tin. So it's very conducive to having a glass of wine, which is fantastic.
Just need the open fire to go with it.
We do need an open fire to go with it. Yeah, exactly. And how many Durifs do you make? Do you make a series of Durifs through the range, or?
No, not really. We do have another Durif, but it's mainly in the export market.
Okay, yeah,
so
sure.
that's the predominant wine that we make here and sell in Australia and export as well.
Okay, and I guess the question is, how many producers are producing a Durif now? Is it sort of a 20, 30?
I would think nearly every producer in this region
Wow.
has a Durif these days.
That's fantastic.
And obviously the Rutherglen region
Yeah.
has Durifs, and there's a few other regions, but I think it's more the warmer areas. It soaks up that sun, and
Yeah, sure.
for me, it's like drinking my Christmas pudding.
That's
how,
a good way
that's
of
how
looking
I
at it.
describe it.
Yeah, exactly. And talk us through the through this one. Obviously, it's got an amazing colour, like Durif often does.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is predominantly off our own vineyard
Okay.
out at Nerrican, and we also had a little bit planted at home in Bilbal. It's fermented on skins, obviously, to be a red wine. Spends 12 months in oak, about 85% of it, only about 15% in new oak, predominantly American, and a little bit of unoaked just for a little bit of freshness when we put it back together again.
Yeah, sure. I was just about to mention that because it's really bright and it's
It is, yeah.
It's got sort of vitality. It's not this big sort of core of a wine. It's got some sprightliness to it, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's something you can enjoy with a nice osso bucco on a rainy night in front of a fire.
Perfect. That sounds very good. That's exactly what I want to have now. So what else can you tell us about the history? When were these vines initially planted?
The oldest ones were planted about the mid-1980s, and the youngest ones are only a couple of years old, which are not in this wine, because it's all the old vines, sorry. So 2022 was a little bit difficult for Durif.
Sure.
We had some tough weather conditions, so we had to pick it maybe slightly earlier than we would have liked, but it's... This is going to sound a little strange, but it's almost an elegant Durif.
Yeah, okay.
Which is not
I'd agree
something
with
you
that.
usually associate with, Durif.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
usually big and robust. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out.
No, they've usually got a fair bit of horsepower, haven't they, and a fair bit of oomph. But this has got, it's got some elegance to it, which is quite lovely,
Yeah.
and that freshness as well, which I mentioned before. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's we're pleased with the wine.
Yeah, beautiful.
Just got to sell it now.
Well, that's right, and
Get it into people's mouths and explain what it's about, so that they do pick it up off the shelf.
and this gets exported all over the place.
Yes, it does.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely. So we have used Petite Syrah on the label
Oh,
in
have
the
you?
past, but we've now gone back to Durif across
Okay,
the
sure.
board, and
More accepted as Durif.
I think it's getting more accepted.
Sure.
Maybe Europe, maybe America's probably still a little bit Petite Syrah
Gotcha.
directed,
Yeah.
but certainly Europe is more open to seeing the word Durif on the label.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for the lovely wine.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you for the next one.
Right, thank you.
Cheers. James, please come up and join us.
Hi, David.
Good to see you. So, your Durif, second Durif of the trio.
Second year for the trio, yes. This is a 2020.
2020?
2020 was an interesting year.
Okay. In a good way or a bad way?
It was a difficult year. We had early frosts. That was quite significant. There was hail. There was and the heat wave.
Okay.
We had massive heat wave and the fire. So most people would have heard of the fires that were right through Australia in 2020, the devastating fires, which devastated. We've got out of it fairly well. We didn't get affected in this area, but certainly there was about 3% of the industry got affected with fire and smoke.
How close did the fires get?
Well, we got the smoke.
Yeah, okay.
The haze of the smoke. I think the closest fires were around Tumbarumba.
Yeah, sure.
Up in the mountains there.
Yeah, I know Tumbarumba got hit pretty
yeah,
bad. I don't know if anyone saw the satellite imagery when the fires happened in 2020 with the plumes of smoke just stretching out over the ocean. It was quite amazing. So
we're all concerned that there might be smoke taint to wines of the 2020, but no, a lot of wines tested. We got out of it. We got out of it pretty well.
Well, judging from those satellite photos, the prevailing wind was going out to sea, so that might have had something to do with it. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the Durif in the vineyard. What can you tell us about it? How does it behave itself?
It's moderate vigor. It goes well in most places, but it really does enjoy the sandier loams, well draining. It tends to crop quite heavy on heavier soils. And on the skinnier soils, on the sandier soils, you'll get the smaller fruit size, the smaller berry size, the smaller bunch size. Moderate vigor, like I said, generally ripening and harvest is between Shiraz and the Cabernet.
Okay.
This was harvested, I think, on the 26th of March.
Okay.
I had a look at the records. So it was a little bit earlier than sometimes we would pick. It was picked at around 13.7 Beaumet, but there were rains on the way, so we decided, because Durif has a tight bunch.
Sure.
And if it does get wet and stay wet too long, it will go off. Botrytis will set in, and,
so
and you'll lose
prone
it. So,
to disease.
so it's quite prone, and at that stage there, we made the call. We had a look. We persisted, but the rains were looking like it just needed to come off. So we did harvest a little earlier than what we like, but in saying that, it's 14 alcohol. You get a little bit of conversion. You have higher conversion of sugar to alcohol. So it's got the 14 and a little bit alcohol. But the flavors are there. It's soft. It's fruity. It's not the biggest Durif that you'll get, but it's very.
It's not a powerhouse, is it?
No, it's not a powerhouse.
Yeah,
no.
It's got some elegance. We've got a question from Freddie saying, "What's the difference between a Riverina and a Rutherglen Durif?"
The same variety, but the Rutherglen Durifs are generally very big, inky, high alcohol. The Riverina Durifs just suits this area. It handles the heat very well. It's got thick skin and high tannin, and it's quite an acidic variety early on. So its acidic acid levels stay fairly well intact. So it does hold together quite well. It's probably not as juicy as Shiraz in the scheme of things. But it certainly has the tannin structure to go a length. Not as big as Rutherglen. Rutherglen is its volume is on 11. We're on about 10.
Spinal Tap volumes.
So more subdued, a little bit more elegant, a little bit more. You can have this on its own. You don't, and you can have it with pastas and stews and even big rich meals, where the Rutherglen is really tannic and big and rich.
Well, I've got another question from Rose. How many producers in the region? Anyone? I can throw that to anyone. How many producers?
There's
Around 20, I think, in the region.
Yeah, something like that. I think pretty much all of us do a Durif.
Okay. And total producers? I think that might have been what Rose was.
There's about 20 producers. A lot of them are family owned, and there's a lot of different scales. So we've got, your really big people like Casella coming right down to some really small people as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, James. We're going to jump on to the next Durif now and get Emma back up to have a chat.
Thank you.
Hello again, Emma.
Good.
Do you want to pour that one? It's on your side of the table.
I'll pour it. Yeah.
Great. So tell me about your Durif and how it might possibly differ from the other two examples we've seen.
Sure. So Julie and James have both commented that their Durif is a little bit lighter in its framework. Ours is unashamedly big. So ours is, 14.5% alcohol. It's American oak, unashamedly. It goes into 100% American oak. 30% of that is brand new. Some of it's barriques, which gives high impact. So the reason the wine is like this is because this was Bill's baby. So Bill Calabria is my boss, and he was so he's a winemaker as well. He, in the year 2000, was the first time he produced a Durif, and he decided he didn't want to be a bulk producer. He wanted to premiumise the winery. So he made this Durif, he put it into barrel, and then he actually entered it into the Rutherglen Wine Show, and it started winning medals and trophies. So it's got quite a following. A lot of people locally trust and know this wine. So whether or not you do or you don't want a big Durif like that, or whether or not I do or I don't like it, which I do like it, by the way, the style of it won't change because it's set and has a following in the way that it currently is.
Yeah. Do you find there is a bit of diversity between the Durifs across producers? It's like house styles? Or?
Absolutely. And so there should be. That's what makes it exciting. So this is very much our house style. I believe Durif should be ripe when it's picked. So I'll spend hours in the vineyard walking through. If the tannins have any greenness at all, it's not ready.
Sure.
So that means our Beaumets are possibly a little bit higher than other people's, but that is the style that we are making and that that works for us. Yeah.
But again, colour's fantastic.
Yeah.
There is you can notice that the oak volume is come up on this.
Yep.
Compared to the previous two wines. But it's lovely, and it's got that super compact tannin as well.
So there's actually this comes from growers and company vineyards, and there's always sort of a handful of growers that might make it, but more often than not, it's actually just a couple of them. And the other difference for us is that this is on part of it's on a heavy clay soil, and the other part of it is on a has a bit of a limestone through it as well.
Okay.
So the soil types I think that we're choosing from listening to the other two speak are a little bit different as well.
And you find those soil types, obviously clay being more compact?
Yeah, it's draining, but it holds water for longer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rice country near some of it, you can imagine the soil types for that.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and you find that sort of those clays come like compact tannins come with those sort of clays?
Well, yes, the block that I'm thinking of does, but there may be other viticultural reasons why that has more compact tannin.
Yeah,
because,
sure.
Berry size can be smaller, canopy can be more open. There can be a number of things rather than just soil type that lead to that.
Okay, I've got a really tricky question from Rose. Rose is throwing out some good ones. Talk a bit about climate changes in the region.
So, how long have we got? Look, yes, it is a part of the discussion. It is affecting us. I think I'll make two comments. This is where alternate varieties become important because they hold their acid, they're later ripening, and they can be smaller through berries through the heat of the season. And secondly, obviously I'm younger in my career, but I think I also grew up in Griffith, and one thing I've noticed is there's just more unseasonal events. So there's more unseasonal rain throughout vintage. So you won't expect it. I grew up and it didn't rain at all through summer, and now it's common to get a downpour of sort of 20 mils or 40 mils during the season, and so we have to be prepared with winemaking tools and viticulture tools to handle that.
Yeah, sure. Rose, you might want to have a look at the University of Tasmania did a great study called Wine Atlas, which looks at climate change in all the regions. And it's got projections out to, I think, 2100, saying how much the temperature is going to increase and how arid places are going to get and rainfall changes and bits and pieces. And I think they're talking about by 2080 just about a 4-degree temperature change. Strangely enough, we're going to get a little bit more rainfall here, and it's not going to change how arid it is here, but it's going to, it's certainly going to change. So it's that suck it and see thing. We're just we've just got to deal with what's happening, and I think everyone's coming to terms with there's going to be changes in the vineyards from here on in. Emma, thank you.
Thank you.
That's a lovely wine.
Thank you very much.
Okay, James, you're back. Now, Botrytis Semillon. The region has become very famous for Botrytis wines.
Yes, yes. And I won't take Julie's thunder away, but basically it really started here with Deen and Darren back.
Yeah,
back
sure.
there. But yeah, the region is world renowned for its Botrytises. It's something that, look, climate change, we don't know where that's going, but historically this area was always very dry, and therefore the Semillon would ripen and we'd get nice ripening, and we'd pick the 12.5 Beaumay, 13 Beaumay, and with the Botrytis we'd leave it from there on in, and it'd be dry, so we weren't faced with any any problems with mold issues and infections of it until we wanted it, basically.
Sure.
As we got into May and sometimes it went out to June. The humidity in the vineyards, the dews, and the moisture would come in at night, and the Botrytis was take off and infect the bunches, and it worked wonderfully. But these last, we're noticing that it is more difficult to get good infection. That's what I've been noticing. Certainly these last 2-3 years for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And can you just run through some previous vintages, perhaps? What are the great Botrytis vintages of the past sort of?
Oh, look, I will talk about our look. Berton Vineyards is 15 or 16. 2006 was our very first vintage. We didn't start making Botrytis until I think it was about 2008, 2009. Okay. But some of the better vintages that we've had, the 8 was pretty good. I think the 16 was a standout. The 11 was wasted. 18 was a very good year.
Did you have the rainfall in 11 that everyone else?
Yeah, it was terrible. Everyone had the rainfall. A lot of the fruit went rotten. So
sure.
Pretty much nothing
hard,
decent was made.
Area, wasn't it?
It was a very difficult year.
Yeah, exactly. So it's 2011 right off. 2012?
No, 2012 was a good year.
Yeah.
Generally, we have good years.
Okay.
We really do. It's fairly stable, the area. We get very good infection towards the end, through April, end of May, into May, and it goes well. It's just these last few years we're noticing, we've certainly copped it.
It's becoming harder.
It's been harder, yes.
And as your thoughts that it'll turn around? Is it a cyclic thing, or do you think it's?
I don't know. That's a big $1 million question.
It is a big $1 million question, isn't it?
I hope it is.
Yeah.
We'll see. And
what's your production of this little wine?
Oh, look, we do small volumes of this. This will probably be about we'll bottle about 500 to 1,000 cases, depending on what we need.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I've got a question here. What are the key characteristics of Botrytis wine compared to elsewhere? So, what do you see that is maybe a marker for from Botrytis wines from the Riverina?
Look, as to French, well, it's really the soil types that would probably give us the biggest differentiation in the climate. I think it's a bit hard to put that one on. I really, maybe the other girls could chime in on that. I really couldn't put a.
I just think that it's difficult to answer because, if you tasted our 3 Botrytis from the same year, they'd all taste a little bit different. Again, like the drifts, house styles.
Sure.
And then also you've got all the variations of what varieties people use as well. So it's pretty hard to sort of answer that quite easily.
Yeah.
Okay. Got another question being written on the board as we speak. Kara's writing like a maniac, which is fantastic. Are most Botrytis wines 100% Semillon, or is there any Sauv Blanc in the mix?
Well, that depends on the producer.
Sure.
Ours is majority Semillon, but there's sometimes we put some Marsanne in it.
Okay.
And it gives it that ageability, and it does complex it a little bit with age. But yeah, some do. But it depends on the winemaker. Yeah, it depends on what he wants to do and how he wants to manipulate the flavour profile.
Gotcha. And with producers in the Riverina, does everyone do a Botrytis, or is it just particular producers?
I think most people do.
Okay.
It's fairly well, the area is fairly well known for Botrytis, and when people come to the winery and taste the wines, they almost expect that there's a Botrytis wine there. So most producers do.
Okay, we've got another question coming in for anyone. So while you're here, James, I'll get you to do it. Put you on the and good question, because you're a Viti man. Soil management techniques or biodynamic activities in the region. What is particular to the Riverina? Well, and is it increasing?
Well, look, we're all about having the ability to sustain our environment here, and so the minimising the amount of times you have to go over the vineyard is certainly a big plus, and not only in fuel costs and so forth, but also soil compaction and all sorts of so reusing, minimising water. We've gone, obviously we were very heavily into flood irrigation early on, and over the last 20 years we've moved towards the drip irrigation, so minimising water, pruning methods. A lot of the processes have become more mechanised, simply because of necessity. The cost of labour these days is prohibitive. But certainly mulching in the vineyard is a big thing.
Yeah, I saw a great video a couple of years ago of the temperature, somebody getting a temperature gun and shooting at the base of a vine, and seeing the difference between the temperature at the base of a vine and then under mulch.
It's a big difference.
It's a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah, I think mulching is very important.
Yeah, it is important. And also when you slash that vineyard, you throw your mulch under the vine, so it keeps the moisture there, so you're minimising your water usage.
Okay, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for showing us your lovely wine. And we'll chat to you when more questions come in. Okay, Julie, let's do it. You've got to pour it. It's on your side of the table.
Okay, I can do it for you. Open it first.
Now, happy anniversary, I believe.
Yes, this year is 40 years since the very first release of Noble One, or Sauterne, as it was called in 1982.
That's right, yeah, it was too. The 82 Sauterne, but that's very naughty. The French will be slapping us on the wrist, obviously. And obviously a very famous example of Botrytis Semillon from Australia, probably the most famous, I would guess. Tell us a bit about the history of it with 40 years under your belt.
Not 40 years of me, but Darren de Bortoli was studying at Roseworthy in the early 80s, and they tasted some Sauternes.
Okay.
And he was really quite taken by the style of wine. He came home and he was talking to his father and about it, and went, it's too warm here, we can't make these here. And Deen said that mentioned that McWilliams had made one in 1956, just a one-off. And it just so happened in 1981, which is when they first were discussing it, there's a lot of Semillon grapes left on the vines, going rotten, as the thought. So the growers were happy to sell their rotten grapes to de Bortoli's. Darren made the wine, it was never released. And then in 1982, I mean, it was picked far too early because they really didn't know what they were dealing with. 1982, perfect conditions for Botrytis. They went out and picked all these rotten grapes, so to speak, and made the wine, and basically the rest is history.
Wow.
It's just continued on.
It's such an iconic wine, not only from a regional perspective, but from an Australian perspective. It's got quite a show, a wine show results here, because us Australians love our wine shows. Yeah, so I see a lot of medals and awards splattered on the bottles as well. Any particular accolades you've gathered over the years that sort of strike with you as being the one that tickles your fancy, or?
Well, I think, every medal you win or trophy is, special in a way.
Yeah, sure.
But for me, it's more about selling the wine and people enjoying the wine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose one thing that comes to mind was Kevin Rudd presented the Pope with some Noble One when he was Prime Minister.
Sure.
So that was, and were not aware of it, so that caused a bit of a raucous for 24 hours.
There wasn't a puff of white smoke from the winery or anything like that?
No, just a lot of people ringing up and asking for questions. I got asked, is anyone higher than the Pope drunk Noble One? And it's like, not sure how to answer that.
Amazing. I've got a question that's just come in up here. Is there a strong domestic tourism market, or is export more important? Or is there a strong domestic market, or is export more important? Sorry.
They're both very important at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in the current climate, people can't travel so much. So hopefully now that, the restrictions have released from COVID, people can start to travel.
Yeah.
You couldn't leave the city. So, out here we've been a bit starved of tourism. Yeah. So hopefully those people, a lot of grey nomads travel through here.
Okay.
Heading north for the winter.
Yeah.
And export is quite strong for us, and hopefully, we can start to travel overseas again and promote our wines.
Yeah, that'd be nice. It's been hard not being able to get out there for a couple of years, that's for sure.
Most definitely.
How much Noble One do you make each year? I'm not sure who asked that question. I can't read that.
Well, that varies from year to year, as James mentioned. It depends on the degree of Botrytis you get as to what sort of extraction you get.
Sure.
And it's a wine, I say, that's in the hands of Mother Nature.
Yeah, gotcha.
She determines, most of it for me. And
yeah, absolutely.
You're discussing, the climate change and how it affects this wine. And the last 2 years have been 2 of the 3 earliest years we've harvested these grapes. And I think it's, we're getting, the rainfall events that Emma was mentioning that we never used to get.
Sure.
You used to get through to, April without any rain, and then you get some nice sort of foggy mornings and lovely sunny days to set it off. Now it's set off a lot earlier in most cases.
And it is those extreme events, isn't it? That's what we having to deal with climate change.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about famous vintages of the Noble One. Obviously, the 82 being the...
82 being the first.
Yeah.
84 is probably one of the most awarded wines they have.
Yeah.
There's been some great vintages. They're all very good in their own ways.
Yeah, sure.
It's like picking a favourite child to ask me to pick a favourite vintage.
You can do that.
Although I did taste the 2000 a couple of weeks ago, which was the very first one that I made, and I'd have to say I was pretty pleased. Pretty proud at how it looked. Nice. Even Darren de Bortoli told me it looked pretty good. So
okay, and tell me, what do you think of the what's the defining characteristic of Noble One?
That's an interesting question. I just think it's probably in this region. It probably tends to be a little bit richer than a lot of the other producers, and that's probably about the way that the method in which we make the wine is probably slightly different.
Do you want to touch on that briefly?
No, not really.
Top secret.
Yeah.
Not with these guys in the room, anyway.
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
Okay, yeah, well, maybe we won't. Okay.
Everyone's got to have their little, secrets about how they do things, but
yeah, sure.
But essentially, I'm still doing exactly the same method as Darren de Bortoli when he started it back in 82.
Yeah, brilliant.
The only real change in that time is now we tend to blend a little bit of unoaked material back in it. Whereas up until sort of the late 90s, it was 100% oaked.
Yeah, gotcha.
It was probably getting a little heavy, so I tell everyone it was when I took over the Woman's Touch that I sort of, just backed it off a little bit, and now each vintage gets a small portion of unoaked just to keep that little bit of freshness and brightness about it.
We have a general question coming up here, I think, on the board. I might have to just peek in. How suitable is the region for organic viticulture?
Everyone's looking at me because we're probably the only ones that make one.
Oh, you make one. Well, you
Yeah,
can go.
we released our first organic Shiraz earlier this year. A vineyard just down the road from the main winery.
Okay, cool.
We have turned into an organic vineyard
Brilliant.
with Shiraz and a little bit of Petit Verdot on there.
Okay.
It's now certified that we can call it organic. So it's interesting because it's really a hands-off wine.
Sure.
From wine. You're not allowed to do too much to organics.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got strict set of rules that you have to abide by.
You're involved with sustainable wine growers.
Yes,
as well,
we
aren't
are.
you?
Most definitely.
So that's more of a holistic thing that goes through like community and waste and energy and all sorts of bits and pieces. So there's a whole lot of boxes you've got to tick.
Most definitely. And one of de Bortoli's aims is to be a zero waste winery.
Sure.
We have solar energy, not enough to power the whole site, obviously. Recycling, water. We actually grow crops, barley, rice, and a lot of the water from the winery then goes through to there rather than just through to waste.
Oh, brilliant.
Everything gets recycled that we can possibly recycle. When we're sourcing suppliers, we look at their credentials in terms of sustainability as well, so that, it just follows. We're all following the same philosophy at the end of the day.
No, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for making such a beautiful wine, and I've enjoyed many bottles of that over the years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Now, we have a couple of questions left on the board that have gone unanswered, and they're both to Emma. So, Emma, do you want to jump up here?
Sure.
And we'll quickly whip through these and get them out of the way. Both from Hannah. Key characteristics of the Montepulciano in terms of fruit, aromas, flavours, Riverina compared to Italy. So
Sure. So for me, and I'm going to speak very generally,
Sure.
Italian wines have a very unique tannin structure, and I find them much more structured than what we do in Australia. So I think the tannin structure of a Monte from Italy will grab you more, particularly on the sides of the mouth, whereas our Monte is a lot more gentle through the palate. And I think ours will have a lot more fruit. So very generally, it'll be the tannin structure, I think, that'll make it different.
And the second question from Hannah to Emma was, what kind of measurements do you use to determine when to pick your Durif?
Yep, that is just my mouth.
Your mouth?
Yes. So I'm walking through the vineyard, tasting grapes, and when I cannot taste any green tannin, which is the dry feeling that I get in my mouth, when doesn't have a green banana skin feel, then it's ready to pick. And that is generally at about 14.5 by May, but it'll have to taste right to go for it.
Okay, brilliant. And I think we have one last question sliding in, and this will probably be the last one we'll have to do because I think we're about to run out of time. And Kara's madly writing. Durif, vineyard techniques used to delay sugar loading versus quick writing. Okay, vineyard techniques used to delay sugar loading versus flavour development.
I wouldn't say that I think there is a technique to delay sugar loading. I think it happens pretty organically.
Yeah, sure.
So you don't try and delay it.
Yeah.
What I would do is just hang the fruit until it's ripe on flavour. So delaying sugar, unless someone can correct me, isn't really a thing. It's just hanging the fruit until it's ready, and that Beaumais will be what it is for that variety.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming and enjoying the tasting along with us today, and what winemakers had to add to the conversation. And thank you, winemakers, for all your knowledge of the region. Your wines are looking beautiful. And it's nice to see these hidden gems coming through to the fore. So again, thank you all very much for coming, and hopefully we'll see you at the next session. Thank you very much.